Okay, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 196 with my guest, Nicholas Samuel. Nick was a student at SoSI years ago and reached out to me to talk about many things, including speed running and some other just personal hobbies of his, of them. And they were very generous and shared a lot of personal sort of struggles that they're dealing with gender issues and gender fluidity. And Nick was very open and vulnerable and came out to me on the podcast as being non-binary. And so we talk a lot about that and what that experience is like for Nick. And I ask a lot of clumsy questions, but just in an attempt to learn and understand. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. This is, without further ado, Nicholas Samuel. Enjoy. All right, well, let's gavel this to order then, Nick Samuel. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while, huh?
It has been. When's the last? We spoke during the quarantine, is that right?
I mean,
Or did we speak? When's the last time we spoke? Let me ask you.
I think the last, and besides maybe like an interaction on Facebook, I think the last time we spoke, you did a show at Berkeley.
Ah, okay, yeah.
The year after. Year after I did SoSI, so it would have been 2016. You were playing with Buke and Gaze. That was the last time we met in person and spoke. Okay. And it was just after the show, I was there with I think Caitlin was also there, Caitlin Colley, and someone else who I'd prefer not to talk about. And we helped pack up, and I still had a beard at the time. You actually seen me for the first time in years without. I have been having some gender feelings and decided to cut it all off and see how I felt about it.
Well, I mean, are you comfortable talking about that stuff?
I can talk about it a little bit, yeah.
Well, I mean, we can ease into it. We don't need to start with it. But since you mentioned it, if you're comfortable chatting about it, I'm sure there's other folks for whom hearing other people talk about this stuff might help them. So.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out a lot of it myself. So I don't know if I'll have anything super insightful to say, but I can talk about it.
Well, I mean, you can only be truly insightful about yourself, and that's all I'm asking you to be. I don't need you to.
I can do that.
I don't require you to speak for anyone else other than yourself. So, if what you say relates to people and they get something from it, great. If what you say doesn't, that's okay. It's you. That's all you can be. And that's what, for me in the podcast, those are the things I'm most interested in, is just getting getting people to talk about things that they normally wouldn't. So, but before we do that, I'm kind of curious. I put a note out on Facebook that was just sort of I don't want to talk on comment threads anymore. I want to talk to human beings. And I'm curious what I mean, there's 4,000 people on my Facebook feed, and 10 people reached out, and I'm kind of curious as to why the people who did reached out. So what was it that caused you to sort of respond and want to do a podcast?
Well, I think I mentioned in the message, I am really bad at reaching out to people.
Oh, Nick, I lost you there, buddy. We'll get this figured out. Nick. There we go. Hey, we're back.
Hey.
It's quite all right.
Where were we? Okay, Juniper's taking the cat toy. That's fine.
You were just saying. I asked you what prompted you to reach out, and you were saying that you're really bad about reaching out.
Right. I'm awful at keeping in touch with people who I would probably enjoy keeping in touch with, and also generally find it's easier if there's some sort of pretense for it. So, it might feel weird to just like want to talk, but for recording a podcast, there's pretense for it, so it's fine. That's a big part of it, and also just like, I don't know, I enjoy talking about myself and things that I find interesting that, are kind of like, I mentioned speedrunning in the message I sent you, and that's pretty niche, and that might be interesting to talk about and like explain how I feel about it and what I like about it and stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, let me ask you, like, so what are you doing? Are you, like, I want to be careful not to just like assume like when I have a that I really only know you as a student from SoSI, right? Like
Yeah.
that's our real only interaction. So as far as I know, you're a percussionist playing chamber music in the
Sure.
world. That's the last I saw you, and I'm curious, sort of like what has life been like for you post school? Did you go to
Right.
BOCO? Is that right?
I was at BU.
BU, excuse me. Okay.
Yeah, BOCO adjacent, basically. So yeah, I finished school. I finished in 4 years, and then Cliff Notes version. Maybe we can get into more detail if you want during the actual podcast. But I spent the next year kind of bumming around Boston. Basically, I worked part-time jobs, and I had a couple of projects I was working on. I don't know if you know her, Reynolds Herrera. She runs like this theatrical percussion show for kids, and that was like my most regular gig for like that first year out of school. I also worked with a group called Percussionisms a couple of times, a percussion collective, and I was in a band also, a trio with some people. At school did like indie stuff. Basically, it was more like pop music, which was all really fun. But due to various reasons, I am engaged now. Also, I have a romantic partner.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We met at school, and they're younger than me. They were a freshman when I was a junior, and they. For various reasons, ended up leaving school and going back home to Pennsylvania. So we were long distance this time that I was out of school, and a couple of things happened. Like one of which was the band breaking up. We all decided very amicably, thankfully, to go our separate ways. And I was like, at that point, I was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with music and if there's like a project I wanted to take on. And I kind of reached a point where I was like, I don't really want to be in Boston anymore. The rent's too high, and I'm working this catering job, which is stressful. And so I decided to move out to Pennsylvania, which is where I am now.
Where in Pennsylvania?
Just like 5 minutes outside of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yeah. Initially the plan was to try and do music stuff out here. I had something potentially lined up, like working with a music school that would provide me students so I could get my foot in the door of teaching. I'm bad with getting my foot in the door with stuff, is probably going to be the theme. And then that school turned out to be my partner was doing work for them, then decided to stop paying. So, and also they just like weren't, like they were never going to get the school off the ground. It was supposed to be a startup. So that fell through. And then finally I was like, fuck it. I need an office job. I just need to have a paycheck at the end of the week every week and like live my life. So I got a job in October of that year. And that's what I've been doing. That's the healthcare job.
Doing what?
I work as a benefit verification specialist. My job is to call health insurance representatives and figure out how they cover a specific drug for patients, which is about as fun as it sounds.
I imagine, though, that's very, I mean, it seems like a very necessary job, though. I mean, you seem to be somebody that helps sort of solve problems for patients and stuff.
I would disagree. I think that my job only exists because the healthcare system in this country is so convoluted and fucked. How do we feel about swearing on the podcast?
That's fine.
Chris would fine. Okay, yeah, the healthcare system is so fucked that there needs to be an intermediary to figure out, to just know how I work, the department I'm working on covers two drugs that are very similar. Like we need a whole suite of people who like need to call people who aren't paid enough to do their job to figure out if a specific drug is covered under the plan, and like we need to be able to figure out all the weird edge cases that crop up, and
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't be necessary, I think. um
But it is.
it is,
You know.
which I guess I hadn't thought about it that way, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I also, and you know, I don't know if I want to get into politics too much, but I do like really despise the healthcare system here. My partner is fiance, I guess I should be saying, is chronically ill and has been like trying to get care for years, and like just keeps running to doctors telling them to lose weight. It's a mess.
Mm.
And like they can't get in to see a specialist ever. Basically, it's a nightmare. We need Medicare for all, and it's not going to happen. And we were planning to move to Canada until just recently, when an opportunity fell through, unfortunately,
Mm.
just to like actually get healthcare properly.
Yeah, I mean, my family, luckily for me personally, I haven't had to do. I've been grateful for health insurance recently, just because of like my own personal like mental health therapy
Mm-hmm.
is much more affordable. I mean, when I didn't have as good a insurance as I do now,
Yeah.
it's like every session was like $175, and I just like
Jeez.
I just couldn't swing it, you know. But I needed it,
Yeah.
I wanted it,
Yeah.
um, and I found it more beneficial sometimes than medication, you know. And so like it's like
Mm.
all of these, and finally I'm like, now it costs me $20 because I have a copay, and I'm like,
Nice.
okay, this is
Yeah.
like a godsend.
Yeah.
That's really the depth that I personally have dealt with it. But my dad, my dad had Lou Gehrig's disease and
Yeah.
passed away,
I
and so
remember talking about that. Yeah.
my mom, I remember her being on the phone talking to health insurance companies, talking about what it's a terminal disease, and they'd be like, well, how long does he have to live? And she'd be like, I don't know. And they're like, well, that's not terminal, you know. And it's just like the back and
Lou
forth.
Gehrig's disease
Yeah, I mean, it's,
isn't terminal, apparently.
well,
Incredible.
it is. It's just it's messy. I mean, you get into like, well,
Yeah.
is he going to die of this? And then if he dies of something that wasn't related to Lou Gehrig's disease, then what does health insurance cover? Like,
Right. Yeah.
anyway, it's a hassle. So I'm sort of sympathizing with you on that. I don't know the
Yeah.
exact conditions that your partner is dealing with, but listen, it's a hot mess here, and
Yeah.
insurance being tied to your employment also. I understand.
Not great.
I understand it as a perk. I mean, when I first
Yeah.
joined the only thing they had was health insurance. Like I got paid like
Yeah.
my paycheck was $326 every 2 weeks.
It's not very much.
It's not.
But
No,
health
it's like a
insurance.
1099 of like $9,000 at the end of the year,
Yeah.
or a W-2, you know. But I had health insurance, and the health
Yeah.
insurance was $535 a month. So
But
like
collectively.
and it was really good health insurance. And so
Mm.
like it was this weird, like as a kid right out of college, I mean, I was like, okay, I'll play
Yeah.
gigs, I'll take steel drum gigs. I know that if I get in a car wreck, or if I get the flu, or if I have something like ALS, I
Yeah.
I'll be covered. As a
Mhm.
like as a poor person, like that was a huge perk.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah.
On the other
I
hand,
just
if Soul
think
Percussion
it
goes,
shouldn't have to be that way. Like,
yeah,
almost every other, developed country has, universal health insurance. So we should have it at this point, is kind of the depth of my thoughts on it.
no,
Basically.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I mean, to me, I'm curious. Just there's lots of my life that I run out of experience from which to
Mm.
talk. It's like I feel like if healthcare, like if you were asking me how to like talk about the origins of the steel drum from Sir Walter Raleigh till now, it's like I could talk to you about nuance for days.
Yeah.
With the healthcare industry, and like how government runs things, I'm in agreement with you 100%. Like there needs
Yeah.
to be something that like Social Security, that
Mhm.
helps people who get stricken with something for whom they have no fault. You know, like there's no,
Mhm.
like the ALS is not something my dad did because he had sex with a prostitute. Like this was
Yeah.
like it's
It
a
just happens.
it's
Yeah.
a genetic thing, you know. So on the other hand, the last 4 years of my life, just observing how a government runs,
Yeah.
the idea that Donald Trump would have his hands on the wheels of like people's healthcare for 4 years, like, or just
Yeah,
would be able to
that's
sow
fair.
chaos in that system because of whatever. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that I don't want it to happen at all. I do. I really, really do. I just like, boy, Donald Trump has got me worried about giving government too much power.
I can understand that perspective.
Um,
Yeah, and I do on some level. The solution I've come to isn't like let's reform the American government. Is I was trying to get the fuck out of here. I was trying to get to
mhm.
another country. I do kind of feel like if a Medicare for all bill got passed, it would the way our Senate works, there'd be an addendum that would make it legal to eat babies or something, or it would be like somehow gate kept from poor people. Still, like you'd need, or there'd be like every other archaic benefit system in the country. Like it would probably still be a mess the way this country
Mhm,
is,
mhm.
and what I've come to expect.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, this is the fundamental problem of democracy, right? Like,
Yeah.
you I mean, okay, yes, there's like gerrymandering is a thing, and
Yes.
that it's like when 60% of the voters are represented by people who got 44% of the vote, or whatever it is. Like Republicans need to
Yeah.
get
It's they
44%.
redraw districts to make it beneficial for the side that has less voters,
Right. So like a
basically.
Republican who gets 44% of the vote, or 67,
Wins like five districts, whereas all the
right,
Democratic voters are centered in one.
and actually represents fewer people per,
Yeah.
than a Democrat does, but the Democrat needs to win 65% of the vote in order to win.
Yeah.
A Republican only needs to win 44%. And it's just like, yes, those biases in the system, the electoral college, there are things in here that are like fundamentally archaic and need to be retooled.
Yes.
The other problem though is that people Marjorie Taylor Greene still gets elected,
That is true.
and this country is 50 separate countries. When you go back and you look at the history, like, you wonder
Yeah.
why Texas, people are like making fun of Texas right now because of their infrastructure, and
Yeah.
like, this is what you get when you have like, Republican policies. And like, listen, I understand you can have that argument, but let's also not forget that Texas was basically seen as its own country for a while
Yeah.
in the history, not too long ago, like two people ago, maybe.
Yeah.
So this, and the like the battles between Native Americans and the currently forming U.S. government
Yeah.
in for territory there, like, this two people ago.
Yeah.
I'm the third person in this line, so this idea that like I somehow, like, this should just be over, or that like things like
Yeah.
racism, for example, like this idea that like we're shocked that people still in the South perhaps harbor resentment towards the North. Slavery was like 1.5 people ago.
Yep, not even. Some people would
So,
argue that it's still going on,
well,
which is a
totally,
viewpoint I'm sympathetic towards.
totally. But the point is, my point here is that like this is just such a thorny thing that like you got to fight it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I want to fight it with more context. I want to understand. Like, I feel like, well, why are you upset in the South? They call it the War of Northern Aggression. I'm like, well, I didn't have my entire livelihood destroyed by the other half of the country. I was on the winning side.
Yeah.
I was on the right side. But now So Percussion flies to Montgomery, Alabama to play shows.
Yeah.
So like, and they're lovely people. Like, they brought us down. So like,
Yeah.
but there's still that element. I also went to tour the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I saw where
Hmm.
Martin Luther King's church was, and I saw the clock that was melted because of a firebomb that was thrown. Like, it's 1.5 people ago. So like, we
Yeah.
not to forgive, but let's also learn the history here and understand that this stuff is going to take a lot more than just like some comment thread where somebody's like,
Yeah.
"You're a bigot," and this is a whatever. It's like, okay, all right, but what's your next 10 words?
Yeah. No, I'm definitely. I think social media has. I'm going to take a sip of water also.
Please.
I think social media has in many ways ruined us. As that's maybe I'm probably going to say a lot of hyperbolic things I don't really mean, but like the way we communicate, I mean, especially now because of the pandemic. Christ, that's the only way any of us communicate now.
Mm-hmm.
Like Twitter has like made things, and Facebook. Now Facebook isn't helping either with like, not. trying to weed out misinformation at all, and letting white supremacists run free, all that stuff. But like just the way we communicate has been so informed by social media for so long that like it's gotten so much harder to have like honest conversations with people.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Well, it's the thing that like social media is the perfect like equivalent to the analogy of the frog in the pot boiling.
Yeah.
Like I invented Facebook, buddy. Like my generation, my Mark Zuckerberg is like my age. He's like 40 or something, you know, like I was at Yale when Harvard had Facebook as like an exclusive thing at just Harvard. And then it got let out to the Ivy Leagues. And where was I? At one of the Ivy League institutions. Right, and so my Facebook profile is like one of the original batch of like, so, and it's, my profile picture is the same as it was from the very first, like I haven't changed it at all, you know. And I remember just being like, oh, this is a thing. And then it went from being pictures of your dog to your coffee to your food to people then started being like, I hate that it's all about food. And then it became politics. And then there's about body imaging. And now there's exploitation of women. And it's like, it really is this thing that now, I mean,
it controls it controls conversations. Like
and it's slowly
it's where all the conversations happen.
Right, but the thing it's slowly done over that time, the pot boiling thing, the thing that it's actually heating us up is that, or why we're heating up is that there's no tone or context on social media. You have you can't read whether or not somebody is joking, if somebody is being serious, if somebody is drunk, if somebody is sober. Like you can't tell if somebody's high as a kite or if they're just pissed off. You can't tell if somebody's eating dinner if they're on the toilet. Like all of those. I'm sorry, I'm not going to have a serious conversation about racism with somebody who's taking a crap. I would never do that face to. I'd never do that face to face. Why would I do it on social media? Like I want to know, and I feel like we're all just in this pot, sort of forgetting that context, and tone are gone now. And we're just being like, I can't believe this person I've known my whole life is now, turns out they're a racist. It's like
posted one status and becomes the totality of their identity.
Right. And I just feel like I have to cancel my mom or something. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Like, I get it. People have problems with their parents. And but
we should at the very least be able to like reach out to, like, give your mom a call and be like, hey, can we talk about that thing you just posted? Like, it's one thing if it's a rando, it's another thing if it's your mom.
Yeah, anyway.
You'd think people would be capable of that much, at least.
I've just seen enough of the sort of, like, blocked and blessed tour. Like, the sort of, I've blocked them and they're out of my life. I'm like, well, good luck if you see that person in a Starbucks tomorrow. Like, you can't just be like, sorry, blocked.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, this is my own personal soapbox. Is why I started a podcast, just because I don't like corresponding. I'd rather say something inarticulate here and then have you say, can you just say that again? And I'll be like, oh yeah, that was clumsy. And we can just keep having the conversation, you know.
An actual conversation, yeah.
But well, let me ask you, I mean, you were sort of vulnerable up front about the shaving your beard and having some you said gender feelings, and I don't want to
gender feelings. So I could be more specific.
I want to be clear here. I don't want to push you into anything that you're not comfortable with. So when we hit that wall, just feel free to be like,
okay,
not comfy.
Understood. I've fairly recently decided to identify as non-binary. I assume this podcast isn't going to be out for like a few weeks. Probably at some point I'll make a post on Facebook about it, and like 3 people will see it because the algorithm isn't going to push it because I never post.
But I'll wait until you post. Just to be clear, I'll let you.
Oh, really?
I'll let you have the first word.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not. I mean, I guess I've been a man. I don't want to be a man anymore. Being a man is. I came to this conclusion recently. There's a YouTuber I follow. Maybe this has come across your feed. Her name is PhilosophyTube. And she has been known as I think I'm okay to like say the name because like all the old videos are still on her YouTube channel. It has been known as Oliver Thorne for many years, making it's very like left-leaning channel, but also like very insightful and generally, does the philosophical thing of looking at both sides, which I think is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's good content, and I enjoy the channel a lot. And she's also an actress. She like there's a big theatrical element to a lot of videos, which is kind of neat. And she came out as trans recently,
Mm-hmm.
and made a whole video about it. And she uses this analogy. She says two things. She talks about like, when she was still in boy mode, looking in the mirror and not like really seeing what she was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that handsome devil. Sure, he's great, but like, who is he?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I hate posting pictures of myself to social media. I wonder what that's about.
Mm.
And also, she uses this analogy of like being in a crappy job, like as a comparison to gender dysphoria, and getting worn down by it over the years until eventually you're like, I have to quit, get a new job. And I decided I like that analogy because I was like, wouldn't it also be stupid if there are only two possible jobs? Like if you want to quit the one job, you had to go to the polar opposite job, basically. And if that didn't work, you're just fucked. So yeah, that's kind of where my, as far as like I've explored the idea more or less so far. So I, decided to identify as non-binary, or to be non-binary, I suppose. And, I was figuring, well, maybe it's time to get rid of the beard then. I've had the beard for a long time. It's been probably about 5 years since I've been clean shaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, speaking of podcasts, I watched Joe Rogan had Anthony Jeselnik on the show, and Anthony Jeselnik talks about a beard being like sunglasses for the lower half of your face. Like you don't have to think about it. So I was like, maybe I need to deal with the fact that I have this lower half of my face and see how I feel about it.
You're talking to the wrong person about beards right now, by the way.
Yeah. Well, for a long time I was, and I that time we first met, I probably said something about like, one day I'll have a beard as magnificent as yours. And so, for a while I was like, oh, this is like, so I can be more masculine. And then, it turned out to not actually be about that. And then I shaved the beard and realized that the reason I liked having the beard is because I don't look like my father when I have the beard. So kind of a whole other bunch of feelings. I'm probably just going to let it grow back out.
No, it's, it's interesting. Like I've been trying to think a lot too. I've been trying to think a lot about like, what is masculinity? I mean, ever since the Me Too movement in 2016 started, like around the Harvey Weinstein thing, and there was this terminology like toxic masculinity started to like pop up, and I've been doing a lot of just personal like, okay, what about me is me?
Yeah.
What about me is me because of society? And then what about all of that do I actually want to change about myself? Like, is being somebody who likes to lift stuff up on a like strongman training, which is like one of the most like testosterone filled things you could possibly do. Does that masculinity, is that something that I'm ashamed of? Well, actually, no, not at all. Okay, then I'll keep that. I'm not going to hide behind the fact that I like to do that. But is growing a beard, is that something that for me is a masculine gesture? No. Yeah. No, I don't think so. For me, it's just a like, for me, it's more of a gesture of like, the older I get, or at least at that point when I first started growing the beard.
Yeah.
I had no money. I had like So Percussion, like I said, I was making $300 every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's not like So Percussion just like every day we woke up and there were gigs. Like it was terrifying. Right, yeah. It still is, And so I felt like I didn't have any control over anything in my life. It was just like, I got to hump it 24 hours a day. And so I was like, this square foot
is yours.
This is the
and you have control over
this is the wilderness.
Yeah.
No one can do anything with this, And so yes, as I'm saying it now, it's like clearly that's masculine. Like I'm doing something just as a like F you, but like and it's just sort of stayed. But I want to ask you, like, and please no, if I'm gonna ask some clunky questions that somebody else might perceive as rude. So if just I'll do my best here.
Okay.
But forgive me in advance. do the feelings, you mentioned the term gender dysphoria, and there's a lot of
Right.
people get sort of really twitchy about using different words, because when somebody hears dysphoria, that implies a medical condition that needs curing.
Sure.
You know, like in the autism community, there's a lot of arguments around whether autism is a
Mhm.
disorder or whether it is inherent in someone's being. You know,
Mm.
I don't I don't even really want to wade into supporting one or the other, but I'm
Mhm.
curious for you, like where do you, I mean, I have my feelings on it, but I don't have experience with it. For you,
Right.
when you use that word, what does that mean to you, and like how early in your life did you start thinking about these sorts of issues for you personally?
Right. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned autism because I actually, speaking of like the healthcare system in this country, was trying to get diagnosed with that while I was still in Boston, and
Mm-hmm.
that was I've reached the point where I've just self-diagnosed because
Mm.
like clearly the healthcare system isn't set up to like properly, go through all the steps they need to do that. Also, when I was young, like I spent my entire elementary school life being obsessed with bionicles to the point that my sister learned the lure so she could talk to me. So I'm pretty sure I'm autistic. Like I don't think neurotypical people do that shit. Um,
I'm not a doctor,
so
so I can't speak. I can't diagnose
I'm
one way or
not I'm
another.
not either, but I know myself. So like there's no way. There's no way I'm maybe I'm not autistic, but I'm not neurotypical.
Well,
Um,
but I mean, I think the thing I would say is that everybody is on a spectrum of something somewhere.
sure.
So whether or not somebody would diagnose you as Asperger's or autism or high
Yeah.
functioning, all of those things, or just, you know,
Right.
ADHD, like I don't even know. Like on the spectrum, there's people, we're all on it somewhere. So,
Sure. Yeah, well, I would say I'm probably a little further along the spectrum than some people.
hmm.
Also, functioning labels are something that autistic people are trying to shy away from. I do
Mm-hmm.
have some friends who are diagnosed autistic, and that's something that can be used to minimize
Right.
autism sometimes. If you're high functioning, quote unquote, it means that like you're less of an inconvenience to neurotypical people. So people don't really, not trying to drill you, of course, but
No, no,
just
no. I mean, these are I used to work at the Cleveland Clinic in
mhm,
2001 with their applied behavior analysis program. That
mhm,
was where like I got some training, and then I would go into the homes of parents who had autistic children, and I would like mentor them for like 2 hours a day. And it was stuff like, these were kids who they were like 6, 7 years old, where they had to like take the tests to get into school,
yeah,
like mainstream school, like walking up and down stairs, um, basic reading skills, basic
mhm,
social, like hello, how are you, like learning how to sort of interact and
yeah,
things like that, eye contact. The research at that point was so non-existent. I mean, I
yeah,
remember it feeling a little bit like the Wild West. Like the
mhm,
parents had no idea, there was no research. Even the Cleveland Clinic, there was just like, we're gonna try this, we're gonna try this. If you see this, maybe this. I don't know. Then
yeah.
Jenny McCarthy came out with the vaccines cause autism,
Yeah, that whole thing.
and it was just the Wild West. I mean, one of the
Yeah,
parents I was working with would only feed her kids McDonald's fries because there was
that
like
was all they would
it was
eat, probably.
it was all he would eat, but it was also like a gluten-free diet, and
Oh,
there was like,
really?
anyway, it was the Wild West. And so the
Yeah,
terms high functioning and low functioning were definitely the way everybody talked. So when I
it
spit
was the
those
only way
out,
to understand it at the time.
but is it Hannah Gatsby, I think, is the comedian who,
She's fucking excellent.
and
Love both of her specials.
she talks a bit about the high functioning, low
Yeah,
functioning. She sort of mocks it. And so, listen, the terminology has changed, and I think it should.
yeah.
But when I said that, it's because I'm from the
That's
time
where.
I worked really intensely with it. That's the way it
Mhm,
was talked about. But it
yeah,
shows progress. That's why things change, and that's why people know more about it now. So
yeah, yeah, and definitely. Like I think maybe that's part of the reason. Surely, no, I assume you're talking like before the time you at the Cleveland Clinic was way before I was like going through school, but even like in the early aughts, I think there's probably a lot more misinformation and wasn't as well understood, which I think is probably why I wasn't diagnosed or wasn't like properly tested for it.
mhm.
Um, anyways, we were talking about dysphoria, right? Um, and I was talking about like, not really wanting to, it's like I don't like posting pictures of myself on social media. I don't really like to I'm looking at your face right now on Zoom. I'm not looking at the lower half of the screen right now. Um, it's just like, I know, I just wanted to talk about like, what proper terminology is. I know that for a lot of trans people, they like to center the feeling of gender euphoria. Like,
Mm.
you know, if someone's a trans woman, it's not necessarily because they feel gender dysphoria as a man, it's because they feel gender euphoria as a woman. Um, as a non-binary person, my partner is also non-binary,
Mm-hmm.
and they like to joke that their gender is an ethereal mist. They just don't want to have a physical form, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what it's like. It's just like not quite feeling comfortable in your own skin, but not really knowing why.
Mm.
And again, I haven't really put in the work yet to try and fix that and figure out what ways I could change my presentation or my appearance to fix that. But
Well, this is, I mean, as you're talking, the thing that, I don't know how to say this without sounding rude, but I've asked for forgiveness already, so
yeah,
please
you're good.
forgive me ahead of time here. I don't personally think you need to change jack shit. Like from my standpoint, again, like I'm
Yeah,
saying this on the outside, I'm saying this as someone I can't possibly know what it's like to live and look out of your
yeah,
eyeballs out into the world, you know. That's the thing. Like imagine looking out of my eyeballs. Like try to picture what I see right now. Like that's
yeah.
weird. It's a trippy
It's
thing.
weird. Yeah,
But the idea for me that you feel like you need to change something about whether it be a beard, whether it be a shirt, whether it be a haircut or physically, like I know like surgery transition, those sort, like the idea that
right.
to me that's where the like societal structures that we all have to go through are forcing that on you in a way that if we
Yeah,
can figure out how to get that off, then you can wear a beard and not, it's never going to cross your mind that that's something, it literally grew out of your goddamn face, bro. Like,
yeah.
or
It's gonna do it again.
yeah, I mean, it's you. It's as you as the feeling of being non-binary is. Like your
Yeah.
hair going over to the one side the way it does, the mole on your arm, if I'm not mistaken. Like,
Probably. Yeah.
like
Probably a couple. Yeah, that
all
one.
of these things are like the mole on your neck. That's as you. I mean, listen, if it becomes cancerous, get it removed.
Yeah.
But like the idea that any woman would feel like they need to have implants in order to be more attractive.
Sure.
Like yes, I understand why somebody like, well, it makes me feel better and that's what I want. I get it. No, 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 no. I want you to feel better. But I like it's just so much more convenient just to be cool with your beard. It's
Yeah.
easier if your
And
brain
you
lets you be
know,
cool with your beard, but there's something that's not allowing that, and that's my reaction, and that's why I asked for forgiveness because I'm making a lot of presumptions here.
sure. Well, part of the reason I decided to cut off the whole fucking beard is because I knew it would grow back.
Mm-hmm.
If I decided I didn't like it, which I think I have more or less, then like just give it a week or two and it'll be fine. Um, uh, I spent for a long time. My view on the whole like gender thing is like I literally like being a man means nothing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't, and being a woman means nothing to me. Like I don't, anything that is considered inherently masculine is something that a woman is capable of, and vice versa. Even if you get down to like bioessentialist stuff, like there isn't really TERFs would say something like, oh well, it's inherently female to have children. But what about women who are infertile? Where does that leave them? Like there's just no, like it's just not a useful way of looking at the world to me. And obviously it's something we still have to deal with because the societal assumptions and all that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
like I just don't, like it's I spent a lot of time thinking about like what does my manhood mean to me, and the answer was nothing.
Mm.
So that's kind of my I forget if there was a larger point I was working to there, but
No. I
that
mean,
that
these are all interesting questions. I mean, these are things for me. I mean, just to be quite honest, I'm terrified to talk with you about this stuff because, these are such third rails of. This is what, like, I won't talk about this even with you on social media. I'll talk about
yeah,
with you face to face right now until we're blue in the face.
right.
But I would not have this same conversation with you in front of 3,000 other total strangers that
Yeah.
don't
And
understand
someone can pluck one comment out of the thread and
don't
suddenly you're canceled.
understand the context of our relationship and
Yeah.
our talking here.
Hmm.
But like one of the things that you mentioned that you listen to Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I haven't watched in a while. I was introduced years ago. Must have been while I was still in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
You posted and it was the one he did with Ben Shapiro and said like even if you don't agree with either of these people, it'll be worth your time to watch it. And I did, and I don't care for Ben Shapiro at all,
Yeah,
and
neither
still
do I.
don't. But
Neither do I, for the record.
yeah, there were some things he said that I thought were genuinely interesting. There's one I don't want to get too into it, but like there's one comment he made about like how the gridlock in the Senate is like supposed to be purposeful, and like this idea that like nothing's supposed to get through without like huge public consensus. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I
Mm-hmm.
don't agree with it. I think that's probably not a good way to run a government so that nothing gets done. But like that's interesting that might have been the intention.
Yeah, yeah.
And so yeah, I haven't watched in a while, but I have dabbled in a little bit of the Joe Rogan experience.
The Ben Shapiro stuff. I mean, I don't listen to him regularly at all, but every once in a while, when I like want to just know what people are thinking, I'll go check his stuff
If
out.
they're on. Mm-hmm.
But he has there's a really good one that he had Neil deGrasse Tyson on his podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and all they talked about was religion, and it blew my mind. Like hearing like Neil deGrasse Tyson is an
I probably watched that one. I think I watched a couple of.
It's really great. And Ben Shapiro, like when he's only talking about his religious beliefs, and there's a scientist like Neil deGrasse Tyson pushing him.
Yeah.
It was just like a battle for an hour and a half in a really beautiful and genuine way. It's like the most genuine thing I've ever heard Ben Shapiro say in his entire life is that podcast. And anyway, but the Joe Rogan, the reason I brought up Joe Rogan is that he does get in a lot of hot water with the trans community because of, and then in the gender community because of some comments he made about MMA fighting. And the thing for me that is complicated, like I personally follow fighting. Like I've watched boxing for as long as I can remember, and like I got into MMA when it was like you could only buy the UFC videos off the like same shelf where the pornos were, in the movie, in like Blockbuster. You
in
had
the
to go
dark ages.
You had to go behind the curtain to go see these people now who like have podcasts, and I listen to them, and they're just normal people, and the woman who fought Fallon Fox is the trans fighter's name, and the woman who fought Fallon Fox, Ashley Evans Smith, ended up beating her actually, or beating Fallon Fox. It was only disclosed afterwards, I believe, that Fallon Fox was transgender, and I think Rogan gets sort of torn apart he gets the sort of like clip taken out, but where he comes from is more of like there are differences when you grow up as a man versus growing up as a woman with the hormones that are going through your body, the way your body structure is, the way your hips are sitting, like all of those things. That's why there aren't open things where like a man can go in and just fight a woman. Like that's dangerous. That's like assault, and you could kill somebody. And so this is just I'm not saying that I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like there's no acknowledgement that this is just a slightly trickier thing
problem
than just
like
having a male or a female. Like Fallon Fox can't just be like, I'm a woman. It's like, well, you were a man for 35 years.
Right.
Like your entire body structure
has changed. I would say Fallon Fox can say I'm a woman. That doesn't mean that Fallon Fox can immediately go into the ring with any other woman and just go head to head. And I remember when I think it's probably around the time of the Castor Semenya track scandal, who is a maybe the viewers don't she's a cis woman who had naturally high levels of testosterone who was essentially forced out of like her track team. I don't remember the exact details, but
Mm-hmm.
you do run into those edge cases, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
you can't always account for every little thing. Like, there's no rule set we're going to come up with that like is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be what was my point?
Well, but just like
you know,
I mean, I think I'm agreeing with you. I want to be careful here. Like, I don't want to say, like, you don't want to have the negativity bias here and be like,
right,
oh, well, there's this one case that was really tough, so that must mean we shouldn't deal with it, and it's all like,
right,
it's all the same. We've got to deal. It's like, no, 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 no. Like I said earlier, everybody's on a spectrum. Everything in the world is on some sort of, like, we have Division 1 baseball, we have Division 2, we have Division
yeah,
3. Like, we have all of these. We have uh, age classes, we have weight classes, we have
yeah,
all of these different things because of over time, we used to just be gladiators in a ring.
right,
Toss them all in
and
there, and
people died.
whichever one comes out alive, man, woman,
Yeah,
whatever. We're going
they
to send a
win. Yeah,
tiger in there too, And now
why not? Yeah,
now we have MMA, which is about as close to that, but now we have a ref. We don't let
yeah,
lions in the ring, and there's a time limit.
yeah,
And I do feel like we as a society need to get better at holding both the edge cases in our heads and be like, yeah, let's talk about this and figure out what
yeah.
this means.
Let's figure out a solution that actually works rather than just forcing them to. I think they wanted Caster Semenya to like take like medication to lower her levels of
Hmm.
testosterone, which is, that's what her body naturally does. So why should she have to do that? Is the argument?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just like, how do you? There is a point at which it becomes subjective. Like, there is a
Right.
point at which Fallon Fox, like, she also has an amazing fighting technique and is just a good
Yeah.
fighter. So, like, and
Yeah.
that doesn't. So it's like there's a point at which you can't be like, okay, now you're woman enough to fight. Like,
Right.
that's there's I understand that's a nearly impossible thing to say.
Yeah. Well, I do. The reason I brought up Caster Semenya is because I know that like I must have there were like some studies done on trans runners specifically. It is probably different for MMA, and I'm not going to pretend I know anything about that. I can defer to your judgment on that, but there's research done, and like the only real factor that was like determined to determine like what the end time of the lap was or whatever
Hmm.
was like the testosterone levels. So
Hmm.
if you're assigned male at birth and you have average male testosterone levels, decide you're trans and start a transition process. By the time your testosterone levels have like leveled out, like you're pretty much on the same playing field as
Hmm.
any average cis woman
Hmm.
or any average cis woman athlete.
Hmm.
So yeah, I know that at least on that front, research has borne out that maybe the solution there is you have to be on hormone therapy for so long, and then we'll switch you to that class.
Hmm.
But
But listen, I also think it's okay for two people like us to have a conversation like this and be like,
yeah, yeah, it's
like, and without
but
feeling like either one of us is a bigot or like some
yeah,
sort of transphobe. It's like, no, I, I want people to be happy and comfy. That's what,
yeah,
like, it breaks my heart, Nick, that like at any point in your life, you're like, I need to change this thing. Otherwise I'm not going to like that. That is just crushing to me.
well,
And,
well,
like,
I don't think it's not really about. I don't I don't really know what it's about. Again, like I'm
mm-hmm,
still like very much sort of in the figuring things out stage, but like I don't. It's not so much like it's about me. It's not necessarily about other people. I
mm-hmm,
think like I know that like you and like my family or my friends don't really care how I present, but it's very much like an internal thing, like something which I haven't identified yet, like
mm-hmm.
just doesn't quite add up. And it's about achieving equilibrium with myself is essentially what I think is happening. Maybe.
Listen,
Um,
I like I said up front, I was just going to ask clunky, awkward questions, and I feel like that's
you
what
know,
I've done.
and
Um,
I feel like I'm giving clunky, awkward answers. I
but
think
I,
we're okay.
well,
We're fine.
but I think what I hope people take from this conversation, I really do appreciate you being so vulnerable here. Like, and I appreciate you letting me be vulnerable too, and letting me ask these questions. It's a privilege for me to get to ask these of you and to hear your responses. And I think what I'm learning, and that I hope somebody else learned, is that like this is a process. This isn't like
Yeah.
learning about who you are is, I'm only a
It's
41-year-old version of my 22-year-old self. And I
yeah.
still like, I think the thing for me that is my bias is like, I've never been confused about my sexuality
Hmm.
or my gender. I've never been confused about who I want for a sexual partner. I've
Hmm.
been confused as to why people don't want me as a sexual partner, but
Sure.
but
Haven't we
that
all?
that I think is a pretty universal human
Yeah.
experience. Like the whole like, why doesn't somebody want to have sex with me? But like I've never, like the first gay person I ever really personally knew was a guy named Jamie Dietz, and he was a
Yes.
real great friend of mine in college, and he passed away a couple years ago.
Yeah, I remember.
And yeah, I grew up in a very small conservative Rush Limbaugh household. There was no hate in my home. Nobody was
Yeah.
like, my parents weren't telling me anything like hateful,
Yeah.
but
It was just in the air.
it was in the air. And so when I met Jamie, I remember sitting outside of a concert hall with him and being like, "Can I ask you a question?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah." I said, "What do you think when you roll over and look at your boyfriend?" And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "What goes through your mind?" And so he's like, "Well, this is somebody I love, and I can't believe they want to have sex with me, and I can't believe that they come to my concerts, and I can't believe that they laugh at my jokes, and I can't believe that they like the food I cook, like all of that
Yeah.
stuff." And I was like, he's like, "What is that? What you're looking for?" I said, "Well, that's exactly how I feel about Stephanie." And he's like, well, "Okay."
Yeah.
And then I said, "Oh, okay,
That's what it was all this time. Yeah.
yeah." And it's like those things I think are that for me was just like one of those crushingly important moments in my life. Had I been afraid to ask Jamie that question,
Hmm.
what wouldn't I have learned by now at 41? What would I have assumed about people had Jamie not been as forthright with me and as vulnerable with me as you've been here, what would our relationship have been? Like would I, there's just it's so silly to not be yourself as quickly as possible. I think that's my
Hmm.
point. And I want you to feel like you can get there whenever you get there.
Hmm.
But Nick, when you get there, fly that flag from the mountaintops and feel absolutely okay about it because we're all hot messes at the end of the day, just for the record. you know, whatever you think about me, whatever is perceived about me on the outside,
Hmm.
oh my God, dude. I'm a hot mess. So anyway, I just hope people listen to this and
Yeah.
have and see your process as like, oh, well, I'm not completely sure about my
Sure.
process either.
That would be neat. I'd like that.
That's okay. And so anyway, that's it. No question there. Just a thank you.
Uh, you're welcome. Thank you. That was very kind. Thank you.
Let me wrap up with this. Where can if folks want to learn more about like, some of the stuff you're working on, if you've got
Um,
any projects or anything that we didn't quite touch on speed running that much, but
didn't touch Steven. Yeah, I
but if folks want to learn more about like what you're interested in, where could they go and where can they find you if they want to?
right.
If somebody
So
and if somebody listened to this and really is like, I'd like to pick Nick's brain.
yeah,
I also do you go by they and them?
they them. Yeah.
Excuse me for misgendering
Yep.
throughout.
You're all right.
I apologize for misgendering you throughout. I should have asked up front. Um, so if somebody wants to reach out to you, they want to talk to you. How can they do that?
So I am a speedrunner. I am currently speedrun Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. I'm also used to run Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. This is we're not going to have time to get into it, but my Twitch is twitch.tv/Texas_grandma. If you want to know why that's my screen name, drop by stream and drop me a follow, and I'll tell you all about it.
Texas underscore grandma.
Texas on Twitter. It's an inside joke between me and my partner, basically.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm not streaming runs right now. I've been in a place where like I get really frustrated. It's a 3 hour run, so like if I if you lose a run 2 hours in, it's a real kick in the dick. So I'm not doing runs. Probably by the time this podcast is out, hopefully I'll have moved on to doing a different category. I've been on beginner 80% for so long, but yeah, that's where I am. My partner likes to we call my partner Texas Grandpa because obviously we'll both be happy to talk about like feeling being stuck in the gender corner and just being like, oh, what's happening. Yeah, I'll talk about speed running. I assume where I was hoping to get to that a little more. That's a bit of a bummer, but maybe I'll come on again.
Listen,
and we can talk about speed running.
the door. My policy for these is that the door is always open, and you reached out, you were proactive, and so just you're in the club now. So whether you like it or not,
Oh, yeah.
I would love to.
I like it. I like that.
Well, if it's okay with you, I would like to ask you that if and when you ever want to talk about any of this stuff again, if you have any sort of, if your process moves forward and you feel like you're like, yeah, I feel more confident about this thing I was less confident about the last time we talked, I would love to hear about it.
Sure, I can drop you a line.
And we'll add the speed running onto that as our other excuse to chat.
Yeah,
because,
sure. Yeah, that's really. I'm not really doing music right now. You can, if you wanted to hear my past work. Cathartic Conundrum is the name of my band.
Cathartic Conundrum.
Cathartic Conundrum. We released 2 EPs. I am very proud of both of them.
Awesome.
Anais is still making music. They're in California, I think. Also non-binary, I believe. Last I heard. It's always hard when you lose touch with someone because you don't know if their pronouns change and didn't hear about it.
It's. I will say, as my generation, I have sympathy for people who are like, everything changes so quickly. And I used to be like, when I was younger, I'd be like, catch up, old man. And now, like, like throughout the podcast, I have been saying like, dude, bro, like those are things I say to my wife. Like that's just like that's like 6-year-old Josh that I just can't get out of my head, and I feel terrible about it. So I
actually don't mind. I know a lot of trans people don't like that, or like non-binary people don't like that. I don't particularly mind. Weirdly, like dude is like a little weird, but like I'm kind of fine with being called bro. Like that doesn't really bother me. Maybe I'll decide it bothers me later. Who knows? It's all a process.
Well, listen, I again, like the thing, I don't ever want anybody to feel uncomfortable by something I've said. But I'm trying, and I think we're all, like I said, we're all on a spectrum, and we're all trying to sort of figure it out. And I think I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to have this conversation with the context and the content being at the forefront. Because like I said before, this conversation I think is nearly impossible to have on Facebook. And these are the types of conversations I like having. So with that, Nick, Samuel, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
I hope your partner stays healthy, and I hope they find the health care that they're looking for and get that squared away sooner than later.
I do as well. Yeah.
But stay healthy, and I hope that we can cross paths. My wife is from just south of Youngstown, Ohio, so that's not far from you. So if we're ever in the neighborhood, we'll have to come by and tip a drink with a mask on or something.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care, Nick. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Bye.
See ya. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in Pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.